On Being with Krista Tippett is supported in part by the John Templeton Foundation, funding research and catalyzing conversations that inspire people with awe and wonder. Learn about the latest discoveries in the science of hope and optimism, forgiveness, and free will at templeton.org.
Each and every adult listening to me right now is a former 8-year-old, wide open with yearning and possibility, understanding exactly how troubled the adults around you are, even if they think they are hiding it from you, almost unbearably alert to the world's wonders and its dangers all at once. And that's the reason you should listen to this conversation with Kate DiCamillo, even if you've never heard of her bounty of books. They include The Tale of Despereaux, The Magician's Elephant, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, Flora and Ulysses. They've been turned into operas and movies, but they are at heart love letters to reading. In the world of teachers and parents and young former children who've grown up reading her books, Kate DiCamillo has near cult status. I read her books with my children. Then in the early pandemic months, feeling unmoored, I was inspired to crack them open to read by myself in response to a piece in the New York Times by the wonderful writer of adult novels, Ann Patchett. She wrote of making her way through Kate DiCamillo's opus as one of the most satisfying literary adventures of her life, and also incredibly calming. This beautiful world had been available to me all along, she confessed, but I had never bothered to pick up the keys to the kingdom. With honesty and wisdom, laughter and tears, Kate DiCamillo makes bearable the mysterious fact that hope and heartbreak live so close, side by side, in real life. This is her gift to her readers and to us this hour. I'm Krista Tippett, and this is On Being. Because of Winn-Dixie, about a girl and her dog, was Kate DiCamillo's first novel, published in 2000. Today, over 11 million copies have been sold. She is a rare 2-time winner of the Newbery Medal. Kate's own childhood, as she freely shares with her readers, was difficult. She was born in Philadelphia, but after spending several winters of her young life in an oxygen tent with chronic pneumonia, her doctor prescribed what was then known as a geographical cure. Her family moved to Florida, but in the end, her father never joined them there. She moved to Minnesota many years ago, and in the way of pandemic times, I interviewed her from the makeshift recording cave in my basement, and she was sitting in my seat in our recording studio in Minneapolis. Hello.
That was the most uncertain hello I've ever heard in my life.
Hello, Kate. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, Krista. Thank you for the great gift of talking with me. I've been looking forward to it.
So, I think one thing that feels like a challenge, but a challenge I'm very happy to walk into, is I haven't interviewed many writers of fiction across the years. It's tricky because I really want to talk to you as this person who has brought all these characters and stories and worlds to many others, but that somebody could enter this conversation that we're going to have without having read any of it and not feel like they're missing something because they haven't read anything.
Yeah, I can.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can see what a challenge it is. You're right.
Yeah. Just to start, it occurred to me as I actually learned more about your life story. If this were a story about you that Kate DiCamillo wrote, it would begin with a sickly child named Kate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm still stuck back on if this was a story that I wrote, which is, it's kind of got it's got a rabbit hole quality to it if I fall into that kind of thinking. Mm-hmm. But okay, I'm with you. So yes, a sickly child.
Well, it sounds like you're someplace you said or wrote, my body happily played host to all of the usual childhood maladies, mumps and measles, chicken pox, ear infections, plus a few exotic extras, inexplicable skin diseases, chronic pink eye. And then you had recurring pneumonia every winter for the first 5 years of your life.
Right. I mean, it just makes me sound so pathetic. And I mean, and I think so much when you say all of that, I think, I mean, I feel it. And I also, I think, how did that kid survive? And then I know exactly what the answer is, you know. She laughed and she read.
She read,
yeah. And she
Yeah.
made friends. Those have been the saving graces. Yeah. And you know, it also, all of those things turned out to be peculiar gifts in a way, because the pneumonia, it got us to Florida and away from my father, which at the time as a kid I didn't perceive as a gift. Instead, I was just like, where is he? And is he going to come back? And also, it was good because I came from Philadelphia to Florida, and I felt like Alice in Wonderland. That it's like there was Weeki Wachee, where there were underwater mermaids. There was Gatorland, where you walked, through a cement jaw of an alligator and watched the gator jumperoo.
Right.
And it was the South. People told stories, and I just I was raised by that small town, basically. I remember sitting on the back steps of Ida Bell Collins' house. She was the next door neighbor, and she's like, "Now, when's your father going to get here?" And I said, "Soon. He's going to get here soon." And I remember thinking, I know that's not true. But you lie for the adults, kind of,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Kate, there's a lot of magic in your books. And I'm sort of going to speak about it. It's not just magic, right? It's magic, and it's a real clear-eyed realism about how complicated and often difficult and often impossible and devastating life can be. But there is a lot of magic, and yet what also just jumps out at me about you and kind of the body of your work and kind of what you've brought into the world is also this everyday magic that is available to every single person, which is the magic of reading. And that's, you said it a minute ago, but just to, come back to that's what it was for you. Like, you were a kid who wanted to read, but you had trouble with it at first. And you had trouble with, what was it, the way they were trying to teach it with phonics?
Yeah, and I
that just didn't compute in your brain.
It did not compute, and it was almost terrifying to me, because I knew that I wanted to read so much. I knew that I needed what was there, and here I was, and this didn't make sense. And my mother, who was a wonderful, complicated person, I came home from, this is first grade is when we learned to read then, and just, I was hysterical. I said, I don't understand what they're talking about. It doesn't make any sense to me. And she said something like, for the love of Pete, calm down. And which is totally her. And then she gave me such a huge gift in how she, and this is a thing that I realized after the fact, she said a couple things to me. She said, one, she said, you're smart. Two, well, we'll just figure a way to work around it. You're good at memorizing. We'll just memorize. And so there's some explicit messages there. You're smart. She thinks I'm smart. I'm good at memorizing. But there's an implicit one, too, which is there's always a way around it. And that was huge, And so she made me flashcards. And every day I would come home from school, and she would just hold up a word, and she would tell me what it was, and I would memorize it, and that's how I learned to read. And it was such an act of seeing on her part. She saw who I was, and she knew what I needed. And I remember my best friend in like kindergarten, first grade was Allison Lance, and Allison was one of those kids who spontaneously read. And it was so maddening to me. Because I remember when it all came together for me, and it was Little Bear, the illustrated by Maurice Sendak.
Yeah.
And I look at those pictures and it just it knocks me off my chair. But I remember you really feel like you're going to come out of your body and lift off. It is you're in. And it is, I don't know if these words made it to you, but it's just you walk through a golden door into a room of light,
Yeah, well, you actually, just what you just said is captured actually in the Beatrice Prophecy, which I think is your latest book, When We're Now Speaking. And I think this is Beatrice. Tell me, is this Beatrice saying this, instructing, each letter has a shape and each letter has a sound, and you put these shapes and sounds together and they become words. Do you understand? He said to her. His heart was beating fast. He did not know. He had not understood how much he wanted it, to know the secret of letters and sounds and words. But his heart, pounding against his ribcage, was telling him. He watched the letters appear one by one beneath her hand, and he felt as if each letter were a door pushed open inside of him, a door that led to a lighted room.
Yeah. I say, I'm nodding my head as you read, not because that's how it feels,
Yeah.
It's a bodily feeling.
I'm Krista Tippett, and this is On Being, today with the writer Kate DiCamillo. I experienced your body of work with and through my children, particularly my daughter, who I'm probably going to quote. She's my at-home Kate DiCamillo expert. And I almost thought that she should do this interview. So I read all the books kind of with her or watched them be part of her life, especially as she left, and, after she left, the books that you wrote when she was at different stages in her life. And then, so I kept thinking, as I was reading you again and thinking about this, of a conversation I had early in the years of the show with a great child psychiatrist, Robert Coles. Did you ever read him? Mm-hmm. He wrote The Spiritual Lives of Children, but he also wrote about the political lives of children and the moral lives of children. And he actually started his career as a child psychiatrist watching Ruby Bridges walk into that schoolhouse every day, month after month, being heckled and yelled at by adults. And being alone in that school. So he was attentive and so articulate about the fact that children know everything about how hard the world is.
Yeah.
And there's this impulse we have, certainly as parents, to shield them, and that they know everything, right? They see that people die. They see that people are bad to each other. They know that their parents are fighting, right? They know that their father isn't coming to Florida and that it's more complicated than he'll be there soon. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's a very long-winded way of getting to the fact that it becomes very clear to me that I think this is part of why your books have landed with so many generations of children, that you honor this clear-eyed truth about children in a very loving and sophisticated way in the books you write.
I have to say that I don't know what I'm doing, because so much of what I do is instinctual. Mm-hmm. And I think the instinct comes from the 8-year-old in me that is just kind of right at the surface for some reason. And it's that the hope and fear of that kid that helps guide me through the stories. And then also the stories always, and you've heard me say this before, they are a way to access something much smarter than I am and wiser than I am. And that 8-year-old in me walks with me as we find that smarter, better place. You know, I was I was really, really small as a kid, and small for my age. And then I looked really like insubstantial, like a strong wind would blow me away. And I was always being condescended to by adults, but yet I was really a sarcastic kid and a kid with a big vocabulary. And I always wanted to feel seen. And that's what I loved about going into classrooms and talking to kids. I just remember what it was like to feel invisible, to feel like you weren't, or that you had to protect the adults by pretending that you believed the lies that they were telling you. And so it's just even in the smallest interaction with a kid, Krista, you can let them know that you absolutely see them there, and with all their intelligence and all their history and like it was electric sometimes to do that because kids don't always get it, you know? And it's funny because a lot of times, like when Despereaux came out, I would get asked again and again, why do you think mice figure so prominently in children's literature? And I always wanted to say, are you kidding? It's because that's how we treat kids, you know? It's just kind of like you're in the way, you're small, you're powerless, and it feels very familiar to a kid, you know?
Yeah, so that's the Tale of Despereaux. And now, more recently, there's the generation of kids who've been, for whom Flora and Ulysses is what they know of Kate DiCamillo. And Flora and Ulysses is a graphic novel, right? It's a little different.
It has graphic novel elements.
Elements, yeah. But I just like to come back to this point about, I mean, when you just were describing yourself as an 8-year-old, I'm kind of, how Flora is this very articulate, well-spoken, smart, natural-born cynic, self-proclaimed, that she constantly refers to her favorite book, which is called Terrible Things Can Happen to You! ! Which is not the book any of us would give our children, but it's probably the one that they would understand.
I'm sorry for laughing at my own joke, but it's just it's so funny.
It's so perfect.
Yeah. But wait, I had something to say back there about Flora and Ulysses and a natural-born cynic, and
okay, take your time. Think of it.
Well, I want to get to, and you can help me with pronunciation. Rilke, am I saying it right? You're the expert.
You have got Rainer Maria Rilke in Flora and Ulysses. Yes.
And more to the point, I have Rilke's Book of Hours here, the Anita Barrows and Joanna Macy one. And I brought it with me because you were talking about the comfort that can be found in what can save you reading. But also this, I come back to this quote so much. This is in the introduction. Rilke never lost his conviction in the utter reality of the world or in our human capacity to redeem it through that act of transforming attention, which is naming or love. And that's being seen. And when you talk about the magic in the books, the magic is just looking and wondering, who knows what's inside that squirrel? That squirrel could write poetry. And it's like that's what we let go of when we're adults. Because I think it hurts so much to see how alive the world is, and that everything is sentient, every being, and so you just kind of close down to that. But that is so much a part of how we see the world as kids. And for whatever reason, I can still access that, and that's part of where the stories come from. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I thought about you in this time when I see these big articles in the newspaper or these analyses going around about, children who've lost time in school because of the pandemic as like this lost generation. And I find that so upsetting on many levels, including just children reading that they are the lost generation or being told that, right? And just at the most superficial level. I also feel like this, what you see and how you see them and how you honor the fact that they know so much and that they deserve to have both heartbreak and hope cultivated in them is one response to this idea of the lost generation. And I found when I was getting ready to talk to you this exchange you had with another writer, Matt De La Pena, is that his name?
Matt De La Pena, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who was asked this question. And I think this is a parent's question too, how much can you, the thing you want to do is shield. I think he said, how honest should we be with our readers? Is it the job of the writer for the very young to tell the truth or preserve their innocence? And I just want you to talk through with me, like, what your response was, because you wrote such a beautiful and profound letter in response to that question. Was that all in you, or was that also a moment where the act of writing something down helped you say what you knew?
I didn't know how I was going to say it until I sat down and tried to say it. And I haven't looked at that for a while, and you all have it here waiting for me, and it actually hurts my... I could read it, or I could flap my arms and fly to the moon. Which one would you like me to do?
Well, then why don't you read it? Because I want you to stay in the studio. No, because I think it is exquisite, and it's kind of out there on the internet as this exchange. I don't think you've ever read it out loud.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Why don't you? Please do read it for us.
Dear Matt, you asked how honest we as writers of books for children should be with our readers, whether it is our job to tell them the truth or preserve their innocence. Here's a question for you. Have you ever asked an auditorium full of kids if they know and love Charlotte's Web? In my experience, almost all the hands go up, and if you ask them how many of them cried when they read it, most of those hands unabashedly stay aloft. My childhood best friend read Charlotte's Web over and over again as a kid. She would read the last page, turn the book over, and begin again. A few years ago, I asked her why. What was it that made you read and reread that book, I asked her. Did you think that if you read it again, things would turn out differently, better, that Charlotte wouldn't die? No, she said, it wasn't that. I kept reading it not because I wanted it to turn out differently or thought that it would turn out differently, but because I knew for a fact that it wasn't going to turn out differently. I knew that a terrible thing was going to happen, and I also knew that it was going to be okay somehow. I thought that I couldn't bear it, but then when I read it again, it was all so beautiful, and I found out that I could bear it. That was what the story told me. That was what I needed to hear, that I could bear it somehow. So that's the question, I guess, for you and for me and for all of us trying to do this sacred task of telling stories for the young. How do we tell the truth and make the truth bearable? When I talk to kids in schools, I tell them about how I became a writer. I talk about myself as a child and how my father left the family when I was very young. 4 years ago, this would have been a lot longer, I was in South Dakota in this massive auditorium talking to 900 kids, and I did what I always do. I told them about being sick all the time as a kid and about my father leaving, and then I talked to them about wanting to write. I talked to them about persisting. During the Q&A, a boy asked me if I thought I would have been a writer if I hadn't been sick all the time as a kid and if my father hadn't left. And I said something along the lines of, I think there's a very good chance that I wouldn't be standing in front of you today if those things hadn't happened to me. Later, a girl raised her hand and said, "It turns out that in the end, you were stronger than you thought you were." When the kids left the auditorium, I stood at the door and talked with them as they walked past. One boy, skinny-legged and blonde-haired, grabbed my hand and said, "I'm here in South Dakota and my dad is in California." He flung his free hand out in the direction of California. He said, "He's there and I'm here with my mom, and I thought I might not be okay." But you said today that you're okay, and so I think that I will be okay too. What could I do? I tried not to cry. I kept hold of his hand. I looked him in the eye. I said, "You will be okay. You are okay. It's just like that other kid said, you're stronger than you know." I felt so connected to that child. I think we both felt seen. My favorite lines of Charlotte's Web, the lines that always make me cry, are toward the end of the book. They go like this. "These autumn days will shorten and grow cold. The leaves will shake loose from the trees and fall. Christmas will come, then the snows of winter. You will live to enjoy the beauty of the frozen world, for you mean a great deal to Zuckerman, and he will not harm you, ever. Winter will pass. The days will lengthen. The ice will melt in the pasture pond. The song sparrow will return and sing. The frogs will awake. The warm wind will blow again. All these sights and sounds and smells will be yours to enjoy, Wilbur. This lovely world, these precious days." I have tried for a long time to figure out how E.B. White did what he did, how he told the truth and made it bearable. And I think that you, with your beautiful book about love, won't be surprised to learn that the only answer I could come up with was love. E.B. White loved the world, and in loving the world, he told the truth about it, its sorrow, its heartbreak, its devastating beauty. He trusted his readers enough to tell them the truth. And with that truth came comfort and a feeling that we are not alone. I think our job is to trust our readers. I think our job is to see and to let ourselves be seen. I think our job is to love the world. Love, Kate. That just about killed me.
It's quite amazing. That line in the middle, that's the question for you and for me and for all of us trying to do this sacred task of telling stories for the young. How do we tell the truth and make that truth bearable?
Yeah. It's such an overwhelming thing that you think, gosh, yeah, I mean, it is a sacred task. It really is. And I feel so fortunate to get to do it, and I realize what a huge responsibility it is.
After a short break, more with Kate DiCamillo.
On Being with Krista Tippett is supported in part by the Fetzer Institute, helping build the spiritual foundation for a loving world. Fetzer's Sharing Spiritual Heritage report asks, how will we reimagine our spiritual infrastructure for today's time? Learn more at Fetzer.org.
I'm Krista Tippett, and this is On Being. Today, I'm with the wonderful and wise former 8-year-old and beloved author of books like Because of Winn-Dixie and Flora and Ulysses, Kate DiCamillo. I really love, I just kind of want to circle back to this communal experience that reading is. I think you've said reading is communal, even if it's one person.
Yeah.
I also have that feeling about a conversation like this, right? Like you and I are speaking right now, and then later other people will join, and it will be as if they are sitting in the room with us.
Yeah, that's the great gift of what you do. And thank you for letting me come along for that ride. Yep. It makes me part of that community too. The community of, I always think that it's like one of the most, I walk around thinking about this all the time, how important this is and how to keep it alive for myself and access it, particularly in these really difficult times. And that's wonder. And that's so much of what happens when you're a part of a conversation, or just that feeling of wonder and amazement, which is appropriate for every minute of every day of being in the world. It is amazing. And in order to survive, we have to, close down a lot of that, because there's so much that fills you with wonder that you wouldn't. It's miraculous. It's miraculous that I was able to use the parking meter out here. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, and it's like, how do we cultivate that wonder in ourselves? And to me, books are the constant reminder to do that. And my notebook that I always have with me is the visual representation of pay attention, pay attention, pay attention, and pay attention is wondering and marveling. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's okay. It's a good soapbox.
Do you admire it? Do you like my soapbox?
I do. I like it very much. Here's something that my daughter said about the Tale of Despereaux. She said it was the first time that she really thought about. She had this experience in the story of many lives, I wrote this down, who magically affected each other and overlapped in some secret way. That this was her first experience of that, and of falling in love with multiple people, and then this joy of realizing that their lives intertwined.
Wow. That kind of undoes me to hear that,
But what you just said, it's like, that is a description of what is happening all the time in all of our lives, but we don't wonder at it.
Right. No, we don't. And and it's like, if you walk through a neighborhood with a kid or, a toddler, it's just like, wait, everything is fascinating. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't want to let that go, because that's a great gift. It grounds you, Mm-hmm. I know I still need to get places on time. I had a friend in elementary school, Kathy Lord, and I loved her. She would sit at the back of the classroom, and she would ask to sharpen her pencil like every 3 minutes, because what she wanted to do was look at what everybody was doing. It was just, she was so interested. And I think about her when I sit down to write. It's like, I think, be like Kathy Lord on the way to the pencil sharpener. Everything that everybody was doing was fascinating to her. Mm-hmm. And that is a way to be in the world. You let your guard down that way if you're just curious and filled with wonder.
I'm wanting you to kind of connect these two realities that both are true and both are big, which is this, what you said, this grounding capacity that we're all born with as children to kind of live in wonder, and how that works together with living in a world in a lot of reasonable despair.
Oh, boy. I realize so much all at once when you say that, which is how much that thing of writing behind my own back, not always knowing what I'm doing, but also how necessary it is to my own psyche, right? So it's like life is chaos and art is pattern. So all of those wonderful things that I see and all those terrifying things that I see, because you have to see it all, right?
If you got your eyes really open.
Yeah. And that's the danger,
and your
right?
heart open.
Right.
Yep.
That's the danger. And that's also the great privilege of being here. And so for me, to synthesize the terror with the wonder and the joy it grounds me and it comforts me. And then this miraculous thing happens where it can go out there and it can provide that for somebody else too. And that's that just knocks me over to think about that. For some reason, this is what just popped into my head. There's so many stories from the old days of doing signings, and there was a kid who was leaning really hard against me as I was signing his book, and his mother said, "Don't lean on her." And this kid, who I'd never met, said, "It's okay. She knows me." And it's like that great gift of connection as I try to make sense out of the world through these stories, that it helps other people make sense out of the world too, and provides comfort and solace.
I'm Krista Tippett, and this is On Being, today with the writer Kate DiCamillo. You know, there's this element in, I haven't checked this, but I think in every single story, in every single book, there's some connection between animals.
Yes.
And also human courage. Oh. And starting with Winn-Dixie, the dog, but also there's pig and a fierce goat, a rabbit, a mouse, a villainous rat, an elephant, a crow, and that's just doesn't even
scratch the surface. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also strikes me that this connection to animals and a solace in animals, I don't know. I feel like that also is somehow in so that's something we're recognizing, but it's something also that's in your books, in your stories, that maybe kids know. I don't know.
Yeah, or it's funny that courage bit, nobody's pointed that out, but it's like I talk a lot about, kids always want to know why all the animals. Yeah. And the answer is so complex. The obvious answer is I love animals. And then the next obvious answer is that, so much of what I read as a kid had those anthropomorphized animals, and then that takes me closer to being a kid. But it's not calculated on my part, but it is very much true that we as readers, whether we're adults or kids, we let down our guard a little bit more easily for an animal character. I think it's a shortcut into the human heart. But then it's funny that it took forever for this to occur to me, but I grew up with a standard poodle named Nanette, and all that sickness that I had. Nanette was like, we always used to say she must have been a nurse in a previous life. It was the dog right. that was up with me in the middle of the night and on the bathroom floor with me, and she really took care of me. Mm-hmm. And so it could be that too. She certainly gave me courage. But you know what else, when you think about it, Krista, it's just like it's that thing about everything, and all the science points to this now, which I don't need to tell you about, but, everything is sentient. And we know that, and then we forget it. And sometimes we forget it because it's too painful to remember it. But we know it when we're kids. Everything's alive. Everything has a heart and soul. And it comes from that, too.
It also, there's so much, the pictures that go along with your stories, but also like the art that goes along with your stories. I just have to tell you one thing my daughter has said. so many times that she'll just shake her head and say, I will never get over my sadness that adults learn to do stories without pictures.
Don't you remember what it was like when you were a kid and you would flip through a book and go, well, there aren't any pictures. And then how you would just like tumble down into the hole of every, like, because, you know, when so I had my mom's book house books. Have you ever seen those? You know, and it would have those full color plates in it. And like, it was just like you would get to one of those and just study it and study it. I'm with her on that. That's one of the fantastic things about writing books for kids is the art, you know? It's just a whole nother layer of magic and also just another shortcut to the heart, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely. So I would love for you. When you won your second. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No. I'm just like I'm wondering where you're going. Yeah.
No. Well, when you won your second Newbery Medal in 2014 in the acceptance speech, you talked about the word capacious, and it feels like a word we need right now. Maybe always, but certainly now. And that we should be teaching our children the word capacious. I also feel like that must have been, I could tell when you gave that speech that you were giving that speech was inviting you to say some things that you hadn't said. So you sat in that room full of librarians and I'm sure writers, readers for sure. We have been given the sacred task of making hearts large through story. We are working to make hearts that are capable of containing much joy and much sorrow, hearts capacious enough to contain the complexities and mysteries of ourselves and of each other.
Yeah. That makes me cry too, because that's it. That's it. And it's what I need too, and what I get from books, and also that thing of being in community with somebody across time and space through story.
Story and reading and writing.
And writing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, how often do people cry on this show? Am I like in a small,
well, you have
sad
a very
club?
capacious heart, so you're more open to that. I did ask if you had favorite quotes of your characters. Did that?
Yeah,
that
came through, and yeah, it sure did make sense, and it got at a couple things which are very interesting to me. One of them is, you know, that thing of the characters being independent of me, and surprising me, which is, and of course they always do. And I brought, you know, there are quotes that go through my head from stories. One of them is the little Leo Matien in The Magician's Elephant, who always is so upbeat and says, "What if? Why not? Could it be?" Which is a wonderful refrain to have in your head as a positive thing. You know, why not? What if? Could it be? But I thought of, when you posed that question, I thought of, I don't know if you read Louisiana's Way Home.
I have not read that one, no. Louisiana
is raised by her grandmother, and her grandmother, well, she ends up, her grandmother is more than a piece of work. She's probably a little mentally unwell, and she ends up leaving her. So Louisiana is abandoned. This is the very end of the book. Louisiana says, this is happily in first person, so it's fun to read. "I have respected your wishes. I have not come searching for you, but I have crossed the Florida-Georgia state line many, many times since we last spoke, and I look for you every time I cross over. I know that you will not be there, but I look anyway, and I dream about you. In my dream, you are standing in front of the vending machine from the Goodnight Sleep Tight, and you are smiling at me. Using all of your teeth, you say, 'Select anything you want, darling. Provisions have been made. Provisions have been made.' I am so happy when you show up in my dreams and say those words to me. Thank you for picking me up in the alley of Louisiana 5 and Dime. Thank you for teaching me to sing. I don't know if you made it to Elfir or not, but I want you to know that there is no curse of sundering upon my head. I love you, Granny. I forgive you." And so that, Krista, is like, she said those words at the end, which destroyed me, and I had no, I didn't, plan for her to say them. And I can trace those words back to, where? To your show. I can't
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember who was on. I think it's the StoryCorps guy.
Oh, David Ising.
Yeah, talking about what you should say.
The things we say.
Yes. And should I say them?
Yeah. Things people need to say before they go.
Before they die. They are, thank you. I love you. I forgive you. Can you forgive me? And when I heard that, I almost fell off the treadmill. And because it so directly spoke to what I needed to say to my father.
Yeah.
And I wrote him that. And then what happens is that those words come back through the fullness of story in a way that I did not anticipate at all, and freed me again. And hopefully will free somebody else, right? Through the miracle of story. And all that goes on subterranean, on a subterranean level for me, and for the reader too, probably. But that's what I thought of when you asked that question, and those words go through my head all the time, and they're Louisiana's words, but I know where they came from, and I just didn't anticipate her saying them. Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked you that question.
Yeah.
I feel like you talk a lot about this, that somehow what things come back to for you is home. And that's somehow what it's always there for all of us. And it's always true throughout the course of our lives, and whether we are conscious of how it's affecting us or not. I was looking at the last sentence of the first chapter of Because of Winn-Dixie, and the two of us, me and Winn-Dixie, started walking home. And that, to me, I have this picture of you, right? You, Kate, that was your first book. And then you've been walking home ever since, and helping other people do that with every book that comes after it.
What a beautiful thing to say, A. And B, yes, what a grand gift that has been to get to find my way home again and again through story, and then to have other people with me on the journey. Can you imagine? What a huge honor that is. And also back to the sacred task part of it. When you think, how I keep on hoping, how I feel duty bound to tell stories. It's what I've been, at the risk of sounding grandiose. It's what I got to come here to do. And so it's what I want to keep on doing.
Kate DiCamillo has written many best-selling books, including Because of Winn-Dixie, The Tale of Despereaux, The Magician's Elephant, Flora and Ulysses, and The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. She's also the author of the Mercy Watson series. Her most recent book is The Beatrice Prophecy. The On Being Project is
Chris Heagle,
Loren Drummerhausen,
Aaron Colasacco,
Eddie Gonzalez,
Lillian Vo,
Lucas Johnson,
Suzette Burley,
Zach Rose,
Colleen Scheck,
Julie Seipel,
Gretchen Honnold,
Jale Akavan,
Rodrigo Tulma,
Gautam Shrikishan,
April Adamson,
Ashley Herr,
Matt Martinez,
and Amy Chatelaine.
The On Being Project is located on Dakota land. Our lovely theme music is provided and composed by Zoe Keating. And the last voice that you hear singing at the end of our show is Cameron Kinghorn. On Being is an independent, nonprofit production of the On Being Project. It is distributed to public radio stations by WNYC Studios. I created this show at American Public Media. Our funding partners include the Fetzer Institute, helping to build the spiritual foundation for a loving world. Find them at fetzer.org. Calliopeia Foundation, dedicated to reconnecting ecology, culture, and spirituality, supporting organizations and initiatives that uphold a sacred relationship with life on Earth. Learn more at calliopeia.org. The Osprey Foundation, a catalyst for empowered, healthy, and fulfilled lives. And the Lilly Endowment, an Indianapolis-based private family foundation dedicated to its founders' interests in religion, community development, and education.
On Being is produced by On Being Studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota.